Hi, all, and welcome back to A World of Bookish Adventures. My name is Shannon.
And I'm Amanda, and we are excited to share with you today's podcast.
So today I am excited. Amanda's excited. We are so excited to introduce indie author Jason Dorough. Now, I don't know, Jason. I don't think we can't use the word met because technically we've never met in real life. But I had the opportunity to meet Jason through TikTok. He is very active on Book Talk on TikTok, and our paths kind of kept crossing over each other with content and seeing each other and such. So when Amanda and I started this podcast and we were locating and bringing authors in, I knew right away that I had to have Jason in because he's amazing, an incredible writer, has hilarious videos, and is very informative. So I'm excited to have him. But of all the amazing things that Jason does, today we're going to be focusing on Jason's book, Akithar's Greatest Trick, which is the first in the Teshovar series.
Thank you.
Welcome, Jason. Jason Dorough is an author and voiceover artist, super cool, based in Florida. He is currently writing the epic fantasy Teshovar series, which began with Akithar's Greatest Trick and The Gem of Tagath, and continues with Lysandra's Deepest Fear. Jason is originally from Atlanta and earned a degree in computer science from Georgia Tech, where he specialized in artificial intelligence and personality psychology. In addition to his writing, Jason is also involved in content creation on Book Talk and YouTube. Well, welcome, Jason. We're really happy to have you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I almost talked over your introduction there. I apologize, but thank you so much for having me.
It's all good.
But I have to ask Jason only because artificial intelligence and personality psychology, like I feel like that is the perfect career path for an author.
When I was doing that, I always have wanted to be an author. And at the point that I went to college, I kind of abandoned that idea for a little while because it was getting drilled into me that I needed to do something to make a living and that computers were where it was at. I needed to learn to code and do all this stuff. And the main thing that I learned from college and from getting a computer science degree is that I didn't want to work in computer science. so so that in that way it kind of directed me away from it, but it took a while for me to get back into writing and to really take it seriously and pursue publishing after that. But yeah, it was kind of an interesting path to get there.
It sounds like it. So we know you're a writer. We know you majored in a good degree that you don't use anymore. So I mean, I think a lot of us can probably relate to that. But what else do we want? What else do you want to share with our listeners out there so they can get to know you a little better?
Like you said, I spent a lot of time on TikTok. I got really involved with Book Talk. It was early last year. It was in, I believe, January of 2022 that I started posting videos there, and it suddenly became all-consuming, and I focused sort of all my efforts there. But aside from writing and promoting it and doing all that, I also am a big gamer. I'm into video games and board games, and I play the piano. I am self-taught on the piano, and I'm also a big fitness aficionado. I do Orange Theory just about every day and go running and all that. So I try to keep myself busy and keep myself pretty well rounded with lots of different interests.
I think that is awesome. And I think I know as I was listening to you talk, I'm like, okay, music, that's Amanda's point. Amanda's a musician as well. And I don't run, but I like to walk. So I definitely think I can connect with you on that.
Excellent. Sounds like we've got a lot of good connections with all of us here.
What made you want to start writing?
When I was little, and I'm talking like really little, I grew up as a Star Wars kid, and I had all the Star
Yes.
Wars action figures and toys, and was doing all that. And when I would play with them, I wouldn't just sort of bash them together. I would come up with stories and would have like actual narratives. I didn't really know that was what I was doing at the time, but I would make up stories and loved just the idea of storytelling. And I had in my mind that I didn't necessarily know that I wanted to be a novelist or that I wanted to be a writer specifically, but I knew that I loved telling stories. And then as I got a little bit older and started reading books and I got really into Agatha Christie and that kind of stuff, I figured out that that was what I wanted to do, that I wanted to tell stories in that format, that I wanted to write books. And at that point, when I was in like elementary to middle school, I thought that I was going to be a mystery writer when I grew up. And so that was where all my excitement and energy got directed. And then over time, just as things developed, the stories that I started coming up with when I really started writing were more in the fantasy direction. And so that's what I've ended up publishing, but I still am interested in so many different genres. I have ideas that I'd like to eventually branch out of fantasy and try some sci-fi, maybe some mystery or thrillers or things like that. But I just always have had a love for storytelling.
Okay,
I
so Shannon and I have a disagreement about the best genre. And I say it's either sci-fi or fantasy, depending on what mood I'm in, but it's definitely one of those two. And so clearly I'm pro Jason right now.
But it's interesting, and I wonder, and I don't know if this is maybe taboo, but like maybe you'll be an author that starts, like as we would say in Ghostbusters, crossing the streams, that you'll be doing like a fantasy book with mystery or sci-fi. Like maybe you'll find a way to like merge all these different genre interests.
Yeah, I actually have kind of already done that. And it's kind of funny because I call myself, and everybody calls me, everybody calls each other fantasy authors, but I kind of don't think of fantasy as being really just a genre. I think of it more as being a setting. And when I write fantasy, I have the fantasy setting as the world that I've created, but the stories that I tell are not necessarily fantasy trope stories. I don't typically write heroes' quests and those sorts of things. The stories that I've written have been stories that have heists in them. They've been stories that are sort of cat and mouse thrillers. They have twists in them. They have mystery. There's some romance in it. So I am categorized as a fantasy writer, but that's mostly just because of the setting, that it's in a world where magic exists and fantasy stuff goes on. But the focus of the stories, it's more than just fantasy. It sort of branches out of it and goes into elements of mystery, elements of thrillers, elements of romance, and even some horror works into it, especially in the newest book I have coming up. So I feel like I do, maybe it's an issue that I don't focus enough on, on one area, but I do like to sort of branch out even within a single project.
I really like that. I like how you were saying that you are, you can branch out and you add other elements into your fantasy book, because I think in a way, and it might be kind of weird to say, it gives some sort of realism to your book worlds, because it's not just about the magic systems. It's really about the world building, and all these different elements make it almost feel real.
Yeah. I feel like at the core of every story, regardless what genre it is, I feel like the characters are the most important part of it. Even in stories that are very plot based, like typical murder mysteries or things where the plot has a lot of impact to it, I feel like the characters are really the core or sort of the soul of the story. And the characters and the way they interact with each other, it has to have a veracity to it. It has to have a believability, even if it's in some far-flung sci-fi story or something like that. There has to be something relatable that the readers can bring back to the story from their own lives and can connect with. So because of that, I like not just following along typical fantasy sort of rails and having the same story told over and over. There's of course a lot of Tolkien influence in fantasy, and just about every fantasy, and a lot of times that goes into the way the plot goes, that it's a quest where people are trying to go and find an artifact or find something, and elements of that will show up in my writing. But I'm more interested in the relationships between the characters and how they care about each other, how they protect each other, things they do against each other, and really focusing on those relationships. And I think that is probably what brings it into the other genres and kind of crosses things over.
And
Wow, it's almost like you have a degree in psychology or something.
that's what I was gonna say. It's where all these things come together. But I,
Yeah.
and I love that. I get so passionate about books where the author takes time to really character build, and not just for the main protagonists and stuff. Like, we expect that, but for the world itself and the other characters, kind of like you shared, that there's some depth to them, because I think it makes such a difference in the storytelling.
Yeah, I always tell people when I get asked questions about how to do character building and how to present characters in a way that readers will care about them. One of the most important things that I've told people a lot, and it's a piece of advice that I was given, I can't remember who told me this, but I didn't come up with it myself, is that when you're writing any character, even if it's just a secondary character or a character that just appears for a couple of pages, always try to write that character as if they are the main character in their own story, because that's how they live their lives. They don't live their lives at the behest of whoever you've chosen as your protagonist. They all have their own lives, they have their own goals and things that they want to accomplish. So it's important to think of every character as being the protagonist in their own stories.
Yeah, I love that. Love it, love it. I think that's fantastic. And I think that's a great segue into talking about Akathar's greatest trick. And I was interesting. I always like to go look at Goodreads and Amazon, and you are sitting at almost 4.5 stars on Goodreads, a little over 4.5 stars on Amazon. So congratulations to you on some great reviews. But I saw this one particular review, and he said was, I made sacrifices to my other duties, chores, and choices to keep reading and delve deeper and dive faster. And I just thought that was a fantastic review. I love it. But he said, yep, my whole world went away and I just wanted to read the book. So why don't you share with our listeners and tell us about Akathar's greatest trick?
Certainly, and I don't know whether I've seen that review, but now that you've mentioned it, I'm gonna have to go find that and use it for marketing.
Yeah, that is it's on Amazon and it's by Keith. So look for Keith
Oh, okay.
on Amazon, is where that review came from.
Okay, maybe I did see that review. I didn't remember that quote, but I tend to not remember the super complimentary ones. It's the ones that are less that get stuck in my head.
Same
But
way. I'm
Uh,
yeah.
exactly the same way. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. I was gonna say, yeah, I'll be glad to talk about Akathar's greatest trick and the Teshovar series overall, because it's the first book in that series. Teshovar is the realm where the books are set, and I kind of think of Teshovar, the place, as being the main character for the series, as opposed to having one protagonist that carries through, because the series overall is going to cover a big span of time, and it's going to start. It's going to follow the progression of politics and religion and various things throughout this realm. But Teshovar is a place that is ruled by an empire, and at the head of the empire is a figure called the High Lord Peregrine, and that's an ancient and mysterious despot. That's a tyrant that is the most powerful sorcerer in the realm. And the realm, magic exists within the realm, but is outlawed except for people within the empire who are at the higher levels of it. And so they have military groups. There's a group called the Imperial Kites that hunts down rogue mages and imprisons them or takes away their magic or just outright kills them. And they're a big part of the first book of Akathar's Greatest Trick. And then there's also another group called the Herons that are mages that turn themselves into the Empire and essentially live in gilded cages after that and work at the behest of the Empire, rounding up other mages. And so they also play a role in it. But Akathar's Greatest Trick is the first full novel in the series, and it focuses on a city in Teshovar called Clubridge. It's a big sort of metropolis. It's a center of arts and commerce and learning. And in that city, there is a stage magician called Akithar, who is the most famous stage magician in the realm. And the story follows Akithar and his theater troupe as they the suspicions start coming to the theater that maybe Akathar's magic is not just stage magic. Maybe he's using real magic and is a threat to the Empire. And so there are investigations going on and things happening there. And at the same time, there's a lot of other stuff going on within the Imperial forces. There are POV characters there as well. And then there also are some characters that are street thieves, sort of urchins that are also main characters that have POVs. So it follows their adventures and goes through, and that's sort of the crux of Akithar's greatest trick, without giving away any spoilers.
Yeah, no spoilers. We try not to do spoilers on here. So that is absolutely that's amazing. I like how it almost sounds like, now I know you said it's going to be, there's going to be one more than one book and it's going to be a series, but it almost
Mhm.
feels like on some level you're setting yourself for potential side books and following this group, or going along with Nira was one I thought was kind of amazing, with her investigative skills, and how she's looking. Again, we're not doing any spoilers, but what she did, and I could almost see like her having her own side books with her investigative type of abilities and things.
Right. Yeah, I do have ideas that I'd like to pursue with side books. The main series overall is going to be 9 full novels. It's going to be a trilogy of trilogies for the core story, but I definitely have plans for side stories and perhaps even some side series that can go off and follow their own things. And then the other book that I have out right now, The Gem of Tagath, is it actually is kind of one of those side stories. It's a prequel novella that follows some of the characters from Akithar's Greatest Trick show up in it, but the main character in the novella is a character that is not a main character in Akithar's Greatest Trick, but fits into sort of the machinations of that city and of its underworld, and follows the street thieves as they're trying to pull off a heist. So I love the idea of populating the world and then exploring it and having the main story that goes through the main novels, but then following up on side stories and favorite characters and those sorts of things with these side stories, novellas, and other things like that.
Out of curiosity, how do people respond to like these side quest type things, since it's not necessarily linear? How do you find that people respond to them?
So far, everybody who I've heard from who has read both the full novel and the novella has enjoyed them a lot. And the only sort of pushback, the only question that I get or point of confusion is which one to read first, because I published Akithar's Greatest Trick first, and then I published the prequel novella after that. So people sometimes aren't quite sure whether to read the in the order of publication or in chronological order, but I intentionally wrote these so that either one can be read first. The novella comes first chronologically, but I wrote it so that there are some twists and revelations that no matter which one you read first, when you read the second one, you'll realize things that you didn't know before about the one you've already read. So they don't really spoil each other, but they have sort of different revelations depending on which order you read them.
That's different.
And one of the things, Jason, now, I feel like I've learned this about you from our, getting to know each other on TikTok and following each other's accounts, as well as your books. But I feel like you're one of those authors that we just love to hate, in the sense that I feel like you really have no limits, that anything could happen. You're one of those, like, oh, you love this character. Okay, great. They're going to be gone. Oh, you don't love this character. Okay, they're going to be around for a long time. Like, you just dive into this world and take your readers on this emotional roller coaster, and you're laughing all the way while you're doing it.
It's funny. I joke about it a lot on TikTok, and I do have some very specific things, and I think I know what you're alluding to that I hear about from readers. But the funny thing is, it kills me to do that. There's a thing that happens in Akathar's Greatest Trick in particular, that it's the scene that I hear about the most from readers, and I feel such guilt over it whenever I'm at a book signing and somebody brings up the book and is maybe in the process of reading it and wants me to sign it. I will look at where their bookmark is, and if I see it's sort of just ahead of that space, I feel the sense of dread as I meet them, because I know what is about to happen to them. And so I feel like it's important to tell a story that does not really give characters plot armor, that doesn't artificially protect characters, and I feel like it helps the veracity of the story. It helps the story to be more believable and more engaging when you don't really know what to expect. There are a few things that I won't do. I won't hurt animals in the stories. I sort of have a hard stop there because I don't enjoy seeing or reading things where that happens myself. So that's one thing that I won't write. There are a few things that I won't write and won't do, but I think there are certain things that are too harmful that I would not put in books. But as far as keeping characters safe in general, pretty much anybody could be fair game.
That happens in the real world too. So that's not, it's not
Mhm.
necessarily unfair.
Right, right. And it's kind of funny because I have already outlined the whole series. I know what happens in all 9 books, and when I'm writing these things, the characters that end up becoming people's favorites, it just sort of works out that sometimes those are unfortunate attachments because I already know what's going to happen in the future. But I haven't taken feedback from readers as far as them liking a character and then decided I'm going to just off that character just to be ornery or anything like that. The only thing. Yeah, the only thing that I've really done that was from reader feedback was in Akithar's Greatest Trick. There's a character named Fairy who is a street thief, and I was kind of surprised. I like Fury a lot myself, but I didn't realize that she would have as positive feedback and be as popular among readers as she ended up being. She is a POV character in Akithar's Greatest Trick, but I kind of thought she would be a favorite of mine, but she ended up being overwhelmingly a favorite of readers. And so when I was doing the prequel novella, I wanted to make sure to put her in that because I like her a lot. And then after I found out that readers like her a lot, there was a perfect place for her to be in that story. So I included her there. And I really enjoy writing her. So that was really refreshing and really encouraging for me to hear. But I haven't heard from people that a certain character is their favorite. And then I decided I'm just going to do something nefarious.
Well, that's good. That's good. I like that.
Since you told us about her, who is actually your favorite character?
I think she might be my favorite, but there's also another character that I really enjoy writing and think he's interesting. I've gotten good feedback as well. It's a character named APAC, that he is an engineer that works in Akithar's theater group. He is the engineer that designs the machinery and different magic tricks that go on the stage. And he's a brilliant engineer, and I wrote him to be kind of crotchety, and he also is written, it's not overt on the page, but I've gotten a lot of questions about this, and I can confirm that he is written to be neurodivergent, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback about him. So I would say that probably he and Fairy, the one that I was just talking about, would be probably my favorites, but sometimes it's like picking favorite children. I definitely have a least favorite character that I've written, and that is one of the main villains in Akithar's Greatest Trick. It's Lucian Geik. He is a soldier for the Empire, and he is just odious. And when I had to write his chapters, I felt gross after after writing every one of his chapters.
And it's interesting, and I don't know. At the beginning when we were talking, you shared you're a big Star Wars fan and kind of that, and it almost feels like you're building your own Star Wars-esque world. Not that I'm saying you're following them, but with all these different characters, and even like when we're talking about Culbridge and the city that's there, and you have different levels of society in different areas, and then obviously the theater district, which is the focus of the book. But and between all of these POVs, all of these characters, all of these the world you're talking about, and all the different parts of the timeline of this place, it almost feels like you're kind of creating your own world, like a Star Wars-esque, like you kind of shared at the beginning.
Yeah, I'm sure that there is probably a lot of influence from the Star Wars movies and from George Lucas and that kind of stuff in the way that I write and in the way I put things together and design all of that, because that was really seminal to me when I was growing up, when I was learning what stories are and how storytelling works. And so I'm sure that a lot of that has come in. It hasn't been a direct overt thing. I don't actively think about that when I'm writing and when I'm world building, but I'm positive that some of that has to come in and influence me. And the world building is something that I really enjoy, and I try to really make it feel like a lived-in world and try to make it as rich as I can. And I've had people ask me before if I would like to see an adaptation, like a TV show or movie or something like that, of the Teshovar series. And the idea of that kind of scares me because I don't know really how that would go. But what I would love to see is eventually some kind of like tabletop RPG adaptation of it, where there would be source books and things that really delve into these different organizations and cities and places and people. And that kind of thing would be something I don't know how to write that kind of thing myself, but I would love to see something like that come together at some point.
I think that would be fantastic. And as someone who plays D&D on a regular basis, I think that would be an absolute fantastic and fun kind of world to put yourself into.
I'm
Yeah,
glad to
that
hear that.
seems really exciting and immersive, and I'm all for it.
Yeah, I would love that. That's the kind of adaptation I would love to see. Of course, it would be if any opportunities came along at some point for an adaptation, I'm sure it would be hard to turn that down. But the the adaptation that really excites me is the idea of doing that, of doing like role-playing books and source books and characters and that kind of thing.
And it's interesting as you're talking, one of the things that I really find amazing about your writing is yes, there's magic systems, and yes, all of these things that we kind of talk about that we expect from a fantasy book, you do have in your series, but it really is a human story you're getting into. The motivations behind your characters, I think are very relatable. I know we've talked a little bit about that already about, your worlds, even they're fantasy based, are very relatable when, you see people trying to, rise from lower society, from, go the military power, the strengths, flaws, all these things of these human elements that I think you've done such an amazing job of expressing each person's unique persona while being wrapped in this amazing magic system fantasy world that we tend to love, who love that genre.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much because I do try to focus on character motivation a lot. I try to give characters a reason to do the things they're doing. I wouldn't be satisfied with a book that's just we're going to do this thing because that's what the plot says we need to do. I like giving characters reasons for being in the places where they are and for continuing to do the things they're doing. If I write something and I feel like that motivation isn't there, that's a big sign to me that I need to go back and revise and to fix stuff. So that's certainly a big important thing to me when I'm writing.
All right, Jason, what advice would you give to someone who wants to write but is afraid to? And I have someone in mind, so make this some good advice.
No
Okay.
pressure,
Well,
Jason. No
No
pressure.
pressure,
yeah, no
but make
pressure.
it
Well,
good.
yeah, the first thing that I would say, it would kind of depend because I would want to know what they are afraid of first, what kind of fear it is they have. Is there a particular sort of thing that they're afraid of?
Oh, for the person I'm thinking of, they're afraid of not being good enough and nobody will like what they write.
Oh, and I just got
Okay.
to throw out there real quick, Jason, before you answer her question. There's the personality psychologist coming through. So see, your degree is working.
Yes,
I'll I'll get to
loud
put
and
it to use
clear.
finally. Uh, exactly. Well, as far as that goes, I think it's important to know that all authors that I know, every author that I am personally friends with, and almost all authors that I know of, there are a few exceptions to say this doesn't happen for them, and I'm a little bit skeptical there, but almost everybody has imposter syndrome. And it's the thing where you have an idea, you want to create something, you want to be creative and express yourself, and something inside you is telling you you're not good enough and that what you're creating isn't good, that people won't like it. And that's something that all of us, including me, experience pretty much constantly. And it's a thing that over time, you kind of just learn to, it doesn't go away. You don't just learn how to make it vanish, but you learn how to kind of have it as almost like a passenger that goes along with you. And you can acknowledge that it's there. You can recognize it and say, oh, yeah, there it is. but then you refocus on what you're working on and push yourself through there. And it's something that it takes a lot of hard work and a lot of time to get to the point where you can reliably do that, because it is an insidious thing. It's something that you feel like is always going to be there, that's going to keep you from creating, that's going to keep you from fulfilling what you want to do and what you want to make. But it is something that you can learn to kind of ignore. And one of the most important pieces of advice that I give to writers in general that are just starting out, whether they are fearful or not, is the most important thing is just to finish whatever you start writing. If you start writing a book, push through to the end and see it through, even if you feel like it's not good, because the first draft is never supposed to be good. It's supposed to be just the clay that you throw on the table that's just a lump there that in revisions you mold it and sculpt it into the story it's supposed to be. But it's not supposed to be good when you first do it. So if you can push yourself through to the point that you actually finish writing that first draft, that is really the key to becoming a writer, because you'll learn so much about dealing with the imposter syndrome to get to that end point. And I've heard the statistic, I don't know where it comes from exactly, so it could be whatever, but I've heard it enough to kind of believe it, that if you can finish writing that first draft, you'll be ahead of 97% of other people who start writing books. Because I've heard that 3% actually see it through to the end of the first draft. So I think that's the important thing, is to do whatever you have to do to stay on it and to finish that first draft.
That is fantastic advice because that makes it there is an actual goal in mind rather than you just got to get over it. So, thank you.
Right.
I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
fabulous.
absolutely.
And so, Jason, I have to ask because, as you know, I'm an ARC reviewer and I do a lot of postings about, my opinion on ARC reviews and how, working with authors and such. So, let me ask from an ARC reviewer perspective, as you have more books coming out, do you utilize ARC readers for your early review process?
Yes, I absolutely do. I don't use the ARC services, but I have a team that helps me to source ARC readers that I will post on my social media. I'll post TikTok videos and will solicit for people to come and sign up and fill out the application form. And my team helps me to put that team together and get the books distributed out to the ARC readers. So that's hugely important for sure.
Well, and why don't you share with our readers, where can they find you? Where can they find you on your social media? Do you have any web pages? Obviously, we'll share everything on our YouTube channel as well as our social media channels. But where can they find you, Jason?
Yeah, for sure. My website is just my name, jasondorough.com, and I am on a bunch of different social media. On almost all the social media, I am Jason Dorough author. I'm on TikTok with that. I'm on Threads with that. Instagram, which I need to update more. I'm on YouTube, which I fall a little bit behind on as well. But the main social media that I do is on TikTok. I'm very active on Book Talk. And my books are definitely on Amazon. Amazon is actually where I recommend that most people get my books, because they, after some things behind the scenes with Ingram Spark and various companies for self-publishing behind the scenes have made some adjustments. My books, by and large, are cheaper on Amazon than elsewhere, so that's where I usually direct people to find them. But yeah, if you go to my website, jasondorough.com, that'll have links to everything else and point you to where you can get my books and where you can find me on socials.
So, Jason, you've told us about these two incredible books. Can you give us any sneak peeks or sneak hints into anything that might be coming out next?
Yes, actually, the next full novel in the Teshovar series is Lysandra's Deepest Fear, and it is very close to coming out now. I am working hard to try to get it out before the end of the year, and it may slip into January, but I'm working hard to try to have a December release. It's in the final process before I open up for ARC readers and go into that process. But it's the direct sequel to Akithar's Greatest Trick. It takes place right after that and picks up the story. It's it's the middle chapter in the first Teshovar trilogy. And so naturally, as second books in a trilogy do, it's a bit darker than the first one. It's a lot longer than the first one. It introduces some new characters and some new places and groups that I'm really excited to get out there. And I also am really excited to let readers see sort of a broader view of Teshovar, because the first book, well, the first two books take place almost entirely in the city of Clubridge. And this next book, Lysandra's Deepest Fear, is a much broader book geographically. It goes to other areas of Teshovar and explores new people and new places, and is an exciting thing to get sort of a broader view there. But it also is still very much a character-focused story. It has a lot of adventure. It has a lot of mystery, and of course, with it being my writing, tragedy in it as well. So I'm very excited to have that in readers' hands and to let them see how the story continues.
So it sounds like we have our prequel and the Gem of Tagath, and then we can move right from there into Akithar's greatest trick, and then that would set them up for the Lysandra's Deepest Fear right after that, maybe in the new year. So they could just kind of have the two right away and the third one coming shortly thereafter.
Exactly, and hopefully the Lysandra's Deepest Fear will be out before the end of the year, but it'll be close. So yeah, it may be something to look forward to for the new year. But that's exactly the path to go on those.
All right. Well, Jason, thank you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and for being us today. I hope all of our listeners check out your social media sites and definitely check out your books. I think it is an amazing, I'm not going to say twist on fantasy, but I think you have created such and are creating such an amazing, immersive fantasy world that I think it's going to be amazing. So definitely, encourage all of our listeners to check him out, check out his books on Amazon. Again, we will be posting all of his social media links as well as his Amazon links on our TikTok, Instagram, and of course our YouTube channel.
That's terrific. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Our next podcast will be on Tuesday, December 19th. To all of our listeners, we so appreciate you being with us today. We especially want to thank Jason for joining us today. We look forward to connecting with everyone each week, and we invite all of you to join us on our social media pages, as well as to like and subscribe to us on YouTube, as well as your favorite podcast platforms. And as always, you can find all of the information in our link tree.
And I have to do a shout out. Our listeners, you guys are so amazing. Not only did you get us to over 1,000 followers on TikTok, we just hit 1,000 on Instagram, and we are at 850 on YouTube. So we are almost to that magic number too. So thank everybody for all that you do and you follow us. It definitely means so much to Amanda and I.
This is a labor of
And
love.
don't forget, we want to hear your own bookish stories and adventures. Please either fill out the form in our link tree or email us directly at awobapodcast@gmail.com for a chance to have them shared on a future podcast.
Until next time, read more books.
And then go explore.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.